like that, poof, we are on to another NFL season. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone Podcast, everyone. Kevin Carroll, Andy Young, coming to you from Indianapolis in the 2025 NFL Combine, where Andy, of course, a new league year starts every year at this time.
Kevin Carroll on the road. What is this? I love it.
I'm out of my element right now, Andy. I'm on the edge with everything I do because I'm not used to the comforts of the studio in which I never leave. But now here I am out on the road, learning the tricks of the trade. You can teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, so for those of you who are just listening to the audio version of this podcast and not watching the video on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you might find Buffalo End Zone, we are both in a hotel room in Indianapolis. We're not in the same hotel room. We are, however, in the same hotel. So Kevin and I hopped in the car, packed up all the gear, drove the 7 or so hours from Buffalo to Indianapolis, Indiana, and we are locked in and loaded on the NFL Combine. We're covering things from a national perspective for Spectrum News 1 across the United States, as well as, of course, giving you all the Buffalo End Zone, Buffalo Bills content that you want. It got started with Sean McDermott on Monday, and then today, Tuesday, was Brandon Beane. And the big news coming out, of course, Khalil Shakir, the standout wide receiver in the slot, signs a 4-year contract extension through 2029. Adam Schefter and others, Ian Rappaport from NFL Network, reporting it's worth $60 million. So he gets paid, does Khalil Shakir, but he's really been the Bills' best receiver over the past couple of seasons. Of course, they had Diggs, and he kind of fell off towards the end of the season, not maybe because of him, but because of the way he was used. And Shakir has really been ascending the last couple of years. So good to get one of those young guys locked up as he heads into his 4th year. That 2022 draft class, really impressive. We'll talk some more about one of the other guys in a little bit, but Shakir, $15 million might sound like a big deal, K-Man, but down the line in 2028 and 29, that's probably not going to be all that much for a guy who's a major key part of your offense. And I believe he's only 25 years old.
Yeah, so Andy, I want to get into that a little bit and kind of jump off what you kind of hinted at there about James Cook. We're going to get to him in a bit. He's asking for money and he's doing it in public, Andy. But to me, this is one of the bigger gets for the Bills to take care of Khalil Shakir first. I mean, he's turned into really someone Josh Allen can totally rely on this year. And I say this a lot. It's hard to believe a few years back we were wondering if he'd make the 53-man roster out of camp. But there he is. You've often referred to him as a pinball or a bowling ball who, after the catch, is just so hard to take down that it's one of the bright spots, with a lot of bright spots surrounding this Bills team this year, although they came up short of their ultimate goal. But I think Khalil Shakir is such a huge weapon for this offense, and I think it's important to have him locked in place with Josh Allen and now add parts around that. But you know, that's one of those things. You have Allen, you have Shakir now. We can get into James Cook a little bit. We can also talk about Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman, Andy, while we're talking about wide receivers and pass catchers, because they came up over the past couple of days and how their performances were over the past season.
Yeah, sticking with Shakir for just a minute. I mean, his hands are incredible. Basically, everything that Josh Allen throws his way comes down in a catch. And he's, like you said, a bowling ball, a pinball, just so hard to take down in open spaces. Is he the most athletic, explosive guy? Maybe that's deceiving sometimes, but look, he's made some long plays, right, where he's bounced off tacklers, weaved in and out of defenders. I mean, he's really a crucial key part of this Bills offense, and he's a guy from the very start bought into everybody eats. And he didn't care about the numbers. He didn't care about how many touchdowns he got. And he still racked up a whole host of yards and touchdowns and catches. I think he's the kind of player that they envisioned when they formulated everybody eats and that mantra. Yeah, that maybe was part of being a team that they were and having the guys that they had at the time. You got to work with what you got. But at the same time, he's a young ascending player who continues to grow as a leader. I mean, he was one of the guys when we voted for the Kent Hall Stand Up Guy Award, which goes from media members to players who are great with the media and who are willing to step up, right, when things aren't going well. Khalil Shakir is one of those guys. And I think he's been a quiet leader, but I think you can see that is starting to grow and he's going to become more of a vocal leader. I remember interviewing him back in our week 1 preview show and sat down with him for 15 minutes. And he was just really a breath of fresh air in the way that he approached the upcoming season, his 3rd year, and all the things that he has with Josh Allen. He's a guy who I think likes Buffalo. He's a guy who, of course, who wouldn't want Josh Allen throwing you the football, the MVP of all people. So, I mean, I think it's a good situation for both. And, you know, it's good. Bean has shown a lot of times that they want to pay guys and reward guys who've come up in their system and done well. Yeah, some guys have gotten away over time and it just didn't work out for whatever reason, but you can see that he's a key cog in what they want to do moving forward.
Yeah, and as Brandon Beane said, Andy, during his meeting with the media, Khalil Shakir is a Buffalo guy. He's not from Buffalo, but he's what you would expect. He's what Bills Mafia wants to see in a player on their team who just comes into work, lunch pail kind of guy, does his job, doesn't complain about it, and does his job well.
Played his college ball at Boise State, Boise, Idaho, Buffalo, New York, right? Like it's, you know, you'll hear some of those comparisons there. You'll hear Josh Allen went to Wyoming, was a small town guy, just another one of those kind of players who just comes to work and, like you said, does the job the right way. Lunch pail is exactly the way Brandon Beane referred to it. And I mean, this is just to me, a good situation. $15 million for a slot receiver in a few years, it's going to be chump change.
Absolutely. We'll move on to James Cook now because he's the other guy, Andy, that these kind of go hand in hand, at least at this point right now. James Cook coming out vocal on what he wants to be paid after having a really good year. You hear from Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott in their opening press conferences out here at the Combine. They're obviously aware of it. I mean, they're no dummies, and you know, they're playing it right, Andy, and it's kind of funny. It sounds like I've heard this before when it comes to players wanting money and contracts from Brandon Beane saying, you know, there's no ill will there. If he sees James Cook, you know, oh, James, great to see you, and they keep working on something, and just because something's not done right now doesn't mean it's not going to get done. And the team holds no ill will towards Cook for wanting his money.
Yeah, and it's funny that Khalil Shakir gets paid a reported $15 million per season. And what was the number that James Cook put out on social media and has mentioned a few times? $15 million per season. So, I mean, that tells you what the ballpark is for what James Cook wants to be. I mean, the NFL is changing to a degree in the last year or two, and that running backs seem to have more relevancy and more value in terms of what they bring and what teams see in using the running game. And Brandon Beane referred to that a couple of times when he was asked about the shifting philosophies around the NFL, and that, hey, look, a lot of teams were playing too high safety. The Bills were one of the forerunners of that. We're going to keep everything in front of us. We're going to drop a bunch of defensive backs. We're going to have nickel corners on the field like Taron Johnson. And we're going to have our front four do the work up front and make you work 10, 12 plays on drives to get to the end zone. And hopefully you make a mistake along the way. And we're going to be smaller because we're going to deal with fast guys on the outside and a lot of passing. Well, teams like the Bills and many other teams said, okay, you're going to play that way. Well, we're going to go back old school a little bit and pound you with the running game. And James Cook came in at a perfect time for that and had a career year and was really, I think, the Bills' number 2 weapon behind Josh Allen. and took a lot of the pressure off Allen. I mean, he ties the career touchdowns mark for the team. He, just continues to pour it on. He's able to do it in the running game, a little bit in the passing game. I mean, he had a heck of a year. It's just how much do they value that position and value James Cook's skill set to pay him that kind of money when age starts to become a factor and all of those sorts of things as running backs age. They may say, you know what, it's worth it. He's such a key member of this group that we're going to pay him. Or, they say, you know what, we can draft another running back. We drafted Ray Davis a couple of years ago. We found a guy like Ty Johnson in free agency, and we'll keep hammering at the draft. And we'll bring in a guy every year or two and just keep on replenishing it that way. So it'll be interesting to see how the Bills value running back, and particularly James Cook and his skill set. Because you remember, Sean McDermott even said it. When they drafted him, it was to be a pass-catching running back. Well, it turns out he's got that skill set, but he's been more of the bell cow running back, running the football, and the first and second down back. And I mentioned it last year and even more so this year, adding that level of physicality to his game that we didn't necessarily always know was there was really tremendous for him. And he was getting some really hard yards. I mean, even look at that touchdown he scored in the AFC Championship game, the extra effort to get there. So James Cook's definitely a player, and somebody might pay him. I just don't know if it's going to be the Bills.
Yeah, and I don't either. And it's really one of those interesting conundrums as, like you say, the NFL is shifting more towards the running back being valued a little bit more after going through a phase where it was just stick anybody out there at running back. This is a passing league. Make sure they can catch, and why not, right? And there's still a little bit of that, I think, lingering out there. James Cook had a great season, and like you said, I think his game went to the next level. But what do you do, Andy? Because it seems like the Bills tend to find running backs every year that, I don't know, maybe if Ray Davis steps into that role and in 2 years he's having a season like James Cook just had. It just seems like the Bills, I mean, James Cook by far, I mean, if we go through the gamut of from Devin Singletary up till now, they've all had their moments, right? But James Cook had a really great season moment to earn, but I don't know if he should earn what he's actually asking for right now for the position he has and what that role still entails in the NFL at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's been the best running back they've had since Shady McCoy. And when Shady McCoy was in his first couple of years with the Bills and was really still tearing it up. I mean, that's a guy who's a potential Hall of Famer. And Cook has been fantastic. I don't think he's exactly the same type of back. I mean, Shady was his own type of deal, right? With Sean McCoy. But Cook, no slight to Singletary, no slight to Frank Gore, no slight to different people who've been in here, Latavius Murray or Ray Davis or Ty Johnson. But I don't know that it's just as easy as, all right, let's just draft the next guy and he's going to be James Cook. I mean, Ray Davis showed signs, but I don't think that he showed that he's James Cook yet, but he could be. I don't know.
Right.
That's why this is so fascinating. It's a roster building exercise. It's a value standpoint exercise. It's how do you value position groups and how do you value an individual within said position group? I mean, you look at Saquon Barkley, you look at guys like Christian McCaffrey, you look at what Derrick Henry did. I mean, those guys have been great for their teams. McCaffrey's been hurt, but I mean, there's different ways to skin a cat, right? So like the old passing game and that's more efficient, the better way to score. That might be true, but that's also true when defenses are playing you a certain way. So I'm really, really interested to see how the Bills shake this thing out with James Cook.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things, because you and I want to say the NFL never sleeps, neither do we, but we each took a week off. So we've been away for a little bit. But one of the things the last time we were on was that Matthew Smiley was going to stay as special teams coordinator. Since then, he has been let go. Head coach Sean McDermott did address it this week on how that change came about.
Yeah. So Matthew Smiley, no longer the Bills special teams coordinator. That news kind of trickled out a couple of weeks ago. But McDermott confirmed all his coaching hires and some of his coaching maneuvers that he's made since that time. And originally, at his end of season press conference, which was, I believe, the Thursday after the Bills lost the AFC Championship game, so that's a week and a half before the Super Bowl, McDermott was asked point blank, will Matthew Smiley be back? And he said yes. And then he came to the podium and talked to us at the NFL Combine on Monday and said, look, I know I said that, but I wanted to take some time after that and fully evaluate the position and what they want out of the position and what happened with the group throughout the last couple of seasons that Matthew Smiley's been the special teams coordinator. And at the end of the day, it's not good enough. We all saw that, right? We saw moments where special teams let them down, whether it was kick return coverage, whether it was, blocked punts, missed assignments, fake punts, giving up. I mean, Tyler Bass has his separate issues. I kind of put kickers in a whole separate container because I don't know that a special teams coach really has a whole lot to do with a kicker's mental confidence and things like that and the kicking game itself. But I do think that it was a move that needed to be done. And they, I liked Matthew Smiley. I actually got to know him a little bit, went on an honor flight with him and some, veterans from the Buffalo region down to Washington, D.C. And that was a really cool event. He and Reed Ferguson went down to Washington, D.C. and flew down with those veterans. And I was kind of on board to capture that. And he's a military veteran and a nice guy and a good guy in all intents and purposes. I think was a family man. But, it's a tough business. So McDermott said that it's tough to let guys go, but they got to get better at the position. And they bring in Chris Tabor to come and take that role. And they thought that, that's a move they needed to make.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we were talking about that's why it was kind of shocking at the end of the season when McDermott said that he wasn't going to move on. But ultimately, they have now, and here we are. An area that needs to improve. I brought up Keon Coleman, coming off a tough rookie season, and Dalton Kincaid, his second season with the team, maybe a sophomore slump. A lot more was expected from the tight end, Andy. It was funny. We talk about how we're out here actually not just covering the Bills, covering the NFL. And I can't remember who it was. It might have been Todd Bowles of the Buccaneers or someone, maybe the Buccaneers GM. They were talking about drafting a tight end and what you look for when you go draft a tight end. And the coach said, well, you need a tight end that's not just someone who can go out and catch passes. They need to be effective in the blocking game, in the running game. They need to be big. They need to be a multiple tool threat for this team to draft at that tight end position. And Kincaid pops into my head as he's not that. He came in as the bigger version of Cole Beasley, and it's just not working out that way over 2 seasons now. And then how the season ended for the poor guy, you feel bad for him, but just I think a lot more was expected. And I think it seems like from after these 2 days listening to Bean and McDermott, a lot more is expected of him now moving forward.
Yeah, they said it at their end of season press conference. They only doubled down and reiterated it that Dalton Kincaid needs to get physically stronger at the point of attack, whether that's in the blocking game, whether that's fighting off injuries, all of those sorts of things. Durability is a big concern for him. They need him to get bigger, stronger, and more physically durable to handle the rigors of the tight end position in the NFL. If you look down the stretch of this season and oftentimes throughout the season, even after he came back from his injury, Dawson Knox was out snapping him. And why was that? Well, because they couldn't really afford to have him on the field when they're going to run the football. There were some times where that would happen, but when they're not running the 2 tight end set, he was kind of a liability in that regard. And teams knew that they're going to have to pass when Kincaid's on the field. And that's okay sometimes. But the whole point of having that Swiss Army knife, multiple tight end, and having that 12 personnel and the inability to interchange Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid is that it keeps defenses on their toes. But when he's unable to contribute a whole lot in the running game, and can't go in on those plays when Knox usually takes the bulk of that, that's problematic. So he's got to get bigger and stronger. He's a great route runner. He's got a great feel for how to get open and those sorts of things, but he's got to add that next part of the game. And it's interesting because the Bills fired Eric Ciano, their longtime head strength and conditioning coach. And I wonder if things like that and Keon Coleman's strength and recovery from injury, if any of that had to do with why they made those moves to get rid of Eric Ciano on the strength staff. But they've made it very clear that Dalton Kincaid needs to get bigger and stronger and more durable to be the kind of player they want when they traded up in the first round to get him.
I know that kind of still bites you a little bit, that you trade up to get the guy. You expect more from that position. Brings us to Keon Coleman. Great dude this time last year, or when the draft came, coming off the combine. He was the darling of the town. Still, incredible hands, great ups, as they say. Made some great plays early, suffered an injury, Andy. But again, another guy who, where they drafted him, you kind of wanted more. And he kind of disappeared towards the tail end of the season. Again, it's his rookie year. He's dealing with injuries, but you're looking for that top flight wide receiver to be in this offense with Josh Allen running it. You kind of wanted more from him in his rookie season. And like with Dawson Knox, the Bills reiterating what they said at the end of the season, that more is expected.
Dalton Kincaid, you mean? Yeah, Dalton Kincaid, you meant there.
Yeah, did I say Knox?
Yeah. We do that all the time. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was
come on, their names sound so familiar. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Keon Coleman is an interesting study because I don't know that he's ever going to be the alpha number one wide receiver. And I think his skill set, he just does not separate. Can he learn to get better at that? Possibly. I don't know. It was the knock on him coming out of college, and it played out in the NFL. He made some tremendous plays. He's very good at high pointing the football. I mean, that play where Josh Allen against the Jets just threw it back across his body into the end zone, and you see him climb the ladder and go up and get it. I mean, the way he did it against the Seahawks and their outstanding cornerback and Woolen and bringing the ball down, high pointing the football. That was the point in time where he was building momentum and elevating. And I think after the injury, he didn't come back as the same guy. I mean, Beane and McDermott have both said it when they didn't see the same player they saw ascending as he was building through the beginning of the season before he was injured against the Dolphins. And they need more out of him. They need him to learn. I think learning the rigors of the NFL is important for him. You got to remember, Brandon Beane brought this up. He's only 21 years old, right? And he's got room to grow in terms of learning the NFL game, in terms of understanding what it means to be a pro, in terms of dealing with that adversity when you have an injury that you've got to play through, and you got to play through some pain, and you got to learn other ways to win because your wrist hurts and you can't push off and jam and those sorts of things at the line of scrimmage and use your physicality. You got to figure out ways to win in other ways. And that didn't happen for Keon Coleman. Good thing for him is he can learn and he can get better. I don't know that he's ever going to be your alpha number one wide receiver. I want to reiterate that. I mean, great for the Bills if that happens, but I think he's going to be a really nice complementary piece for a long time. But I think they still want to see more out of him than they gave down the stretch.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Josh Allen because we heard from Beane and McDermott for the first time since Allen won the MVP. I mean, I don't. What were they going to say, right, Andy?
Yeah. It was cool because I did ask Beane. I did a little one-on-one interview with Brandon Beane after he did his podium stuff, and Beane's great in that way because he gives a lot to the media. McDermott often too, but Beane is really tremendous in giving his time to the media. I mean, he did a half an hour at the podium, then he went and did all the national radio shows and podcasts for another hour or so. Then he did another 20 minutes or half hour with just local print reporters. and then did one-on-one interviews with all the TV stations from Buffalo and Rochester that are here at the NFL Combine too. But in that
Incredible.
moment with Bean, yeah, I said, think back to 2018 and when you drafted Josh and all the doubters and the naysayers and the people who said, it would be the biggest anomaly in NFL history if this guy pans out and this guy's never going to be accurate. And think about what the road was to get him to the point where he's the NFL MVP. And he said, it's kind of like being a proud parent to see that the things that you instilled and the way that you helped raise Josh, and a lot of Josh is involved in that too, himself doing a lot of that. But the Bills certainly get credit for developing Josh Allen into one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL and the 2024 NFL MVP. So it was pretty cool to hear that from Brandon Beane, just thinking back on the process and where they were 7 years ago at this time at the Combine and at the Senior Bowl in 2018 before they drafted Josh Allen. So I mean, it's really cool. I also thought it was interesting. Beane said that it was a little bit of a pick me up for the city of Buffalo and for the team after such disappointment in the AFC Championship game. He said, it's a consolation prize, no doubt about it, but it did matter that he won that award. Obviously, they want to be the ones playing in the Super Bowl, and that's far more important. But it was nice. I think the city of Buffalo and the town and Bills fans definitely got a lift from it for sure.
Yeah, totally. Now, it is the NFL Combine. It is where teams come to get a look at possible draft picks. The future of the NFL is now. It's right here, Andy, right? It's all over the place out here. Before we go, I mean, there's plenty of time to talk about this kind of stuff leading up to the draft, Andy, but I think no surprise here between you and I. I think the Bills are looking probably at defensive line, Andy, and it's a good defensive line class that's involved in everything out here this week.
Yeah, there's been a ton of talk about the Eagles and what they did to the Kansas City Chiefs. And is that the blueprint? And is what the Buccaneers did against Mahomes and the Chiefs a couple of years ago when they beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl and just had Mahomes running for his life? Is that how you're going to beat a team like that and get over the hump? There's been so much talk about the amount of resources they've poured into the defensive line, the draft picks, the signings, Von Miller, all of these sorts of things. And then it still turns out that you could probably use a little more juice there. And are you going to make a trade for a Myles Garrett, for a Micah Parsons, for a Max Crosby, one of these alphas, one of these game-wrecking defensive ends? Or do you look at it like you need more inside? Do you need another defensive tackle to go with that Oliver, somebody who can be that one technique nose tackle that just blasts people in the run game and takes up double teams and allows Oliver to get off? Or, how do you look at that? Do you make a trade? Is this a draft where you want to do that? It's going to be really interesting. I mean, we talked with Chris Trapasso, our good buddy from CBS Sports, who's an awesome draft analyst and happens to be a Western New York native too. And so he knows all about the Bills situation. And he mentioned a few names like Kenneth Grant from Michigan, some different guys who really could be in that mix early in the draft, like the first round. If you're staying at pick 30, maybe you stay put and you take a defensive tackle there. And that might be different than the last few years. We've been saying wide receiver or corner or these different positions. It might be those big bullies up front, right? That need to get more physical and need to get stronger up front, whether that's the running game or disrupting the passing game as well.
All right, we're gonna be here the entire week, Andy. Soup to nuts, you and I covering the Bills out here this week. Maybe we can get together next Wednesday, right? And we'll go over all this, what we experienced out here, kind of get everyone up to speed on what went down out here. Next Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, if we're not all just going to take the next couple of weeks off after this combine, we're working the K-man to the bone here, guys. We're making him earn that salary, right?
K-Man's got to go stuff his face with some food is what K-Man needs to do.
Yeah, it'll be good. Like because once the combine happens and guys run and they do their 40s and you hear stuff about the interviews and they do the bench press and the shuttle drills and all that, then you'll start to see stuff kind of slot in as to where guys are going to fall. You got risers, you've got guys who drop, medical issues, all those things. So it'd be good in the next couple of weeks to revisit this, and we'll talk a ton about it all the way leading up into the draft, at the end of April, about who we see fitting the Bills, some targets, all those sorts of things. We'll bring on some special guests. I'm sure we'll have Chris Trapasso on, other folks to talk about these sorts of things and who might be guys that the Bills should and could target and might be available in those spots. Plus, we'll talk free agency, all the new league year, trades. I mean, I think Brandon Beane might have something up his sleeve, so we'll see.
I was going to say, it always goes like this. No matter what you think after the combine, going towards the draft, free agency always screws up a lot of what you might have thought was coming down the pike by the time the draft gets here. But Andy, and I, as always, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back again over the next few weeks leading up to the new league year and the draft. You got anything else to add, Andy?
Hey, as always, like, comment, subscribe, share, leave a review. We want to grow this Buffalo End Zone podcast. Now, we took a couple of weeks off, a little vacation after the Super Bowl. But we are back, fully loaded. We'll be here most every week leading up through the draft. And then, before we know it, we're talking OTAs and mini camp and training camp. So, I mean, it takes off now. It flies.
All right, I'm going to hit send on my order and go pick it up for dinner. As always, everybody, thanks for tuning in and joining us from the NFL Combine out in Indianapolis. Kevin and Andy, we'll catch up with you down the road.